The transport ship's cargo hold smelled of rust and recycled air. John Hale stood with his hands shoved deep into his pockets, watching as the Zenthari delegation descended the ramp with ceremonial precision. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught, the dim overhead lights scattering fragments of pale blue across the corrugated metal walls. "Mr. Hale," the lead Zenthari intoned, his translator converting the clicking syllables into flat, emotionless standard. "We present to you Rhea Varys, as stipulated by Accord 793. Behind the delegation, a figure emerged. She was tall, taller than John by half a head, with skin the color of twilight and eyes that burned like molten copper. Her species, the Draven, were known across 6 systems as warriors and conquerors. The intricate markings along her arms told stories John couldn't read, but he recognized the weight they carried. This was someone who had commanded fleets, who had watched worlds burn. And now she was his problem. "I don't understand," John said, though he'd read the document a dozen times. "You're giving her to me?" "Binding her to you," the Zenthari corrected. "Warlord Carveth is dead. By our law, his widow must be bound to another as penance for his crimes. You submitted a salvage claim on his flagship debris. Therefore you inherit his obligation." Rhea Varys said nothing. Her expression was carved from stone, but her hands, cuffed with some kind of energy restraints, trembled almost imperceptibly. John had filed that salvage claim 3 months ago for scrap metal, not knowing it would come with a widowed alien warlord's wife bound to him by some obscure interstellar law he'd never heard of. "And if I refuse?" he asked. "Then she will be executed at dawn." The Zenthari's antennae twitched. "We assumed a human would prefer alternatives to death. Were we incorrect?" John looked at Rhea. Her copper eyes met his, and for just a moment, he saw something beyond the warrior's mask. Fear, pride, resignation. "No," he sighed. "You weren't incorrect." The first week was silence. Rhea moved through John's modest quarters on Station Theta 7 like a ghost. She touched nothing, spoke to no one, and spent hours staring out the viewport at the stars. The energy. Cuffs had been removed, but she wore their absence like phantom limbs, constantly flexing her wrists as if expecting resistance. John gave her space. His work as a mechanic kept him busy, crawling through engine shafts, rewiring power conduits, patching hull breaches. The station was old, constantly breaking, and John was one of 3 people who knew her systems well enough to keep her running. He'd leave meals outside Rhea's door. Sometimes she ate them. Sometimes she didn't. On the 8th day, he found her in his workshop. She stood before his workbench, examining a disassembled servo motor with the intensity of someone reading ancient scripture. Her fingers, long and precise, hovered over the components without touching them. "It's broken," John said from the doorway. "Seized bearing. I'm waiting on a replacement part." "You could fabricate one," Rhea said. Her voice was deeper than he'd expected, with a resonance that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "The station has a molecular printer in Bay 4. That printer's been offline for 2 years, because the cooling system has a leak in the tertiary junction." She finally looked at him. "I watched you walk past it yesterday. You didn't notice." John frowned. "How would you know that?" "Because I was trained to notice everything." She turned back to the servo motor. "A warlord's wife is not merely decorative, human. I commanded supply lines. I calculated resource allocations. I ensured that fleets numbering in the thousands never lacked for fuel, ammunition, or replacement parts." Her voice was flat, clinical. "I was very good at my work. Until your husband was killed." Her jaw tightened. "Until my husband's ambition exceeded his strategic capability, yes." John crossed his arms. "You didn't agree with him?" "I advised against the assault on the Zenthari colony worlds." Rhea's copper eyes flashed. "I told him the supply lines were overextended, that the terrain favored defenders, that the Zenthari would fight to the last rather than surrender." She paused. "He called me fearful, weak. He said I had forgotten what it meant to be driven. And then he died. And then 60,000 soldiers died with him." Her voice finally cracked. Soldiers I had equipped. Soldiers I had provisioned. Soldiers whose blood is on my hands as much as his. The workshop fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support. "Come with me," John said quietly. Bay 4 was a graveyard of forgotten equipment. John led Rhea to the molecular printer, a hulking machine covered in dust and warning labels. She circled it once, her eyes scanning every panel and connection point, before kneeling beside a cooling unit mounted low on the chassis. "Here," she said, pointing. "The leak." John crouched beside her. Sure enough, there was a hairline crack in one of the coolant lines, so small he'd need a magnifier to see it properly. A tiny puddle of blue fluid had pooled beneath it. "How did you spot that from across the bay yesterday?" "I told you. I was trained to notice everything." She stood, brushing dust from her knees. "Do you have sealant?" They worked together through the afternoon. Rhea's hands moved with surgeon-like precision, her knowledge of ship systems rivaling John's own. She didn't just fix the leak, she optimized the entire cooling array, rerouting power flows and adjusting thermal regulators until the machine hummed with an efficiency it probably hadn't had since installation. When they fired up the printer, it worked perfectly. "Thank you," John said. Rhea nodded once, then returned to staring at the machine. "I need purpose, John Hale. I need to be useful. If I am simply a prisoner in your quarters waiting for time to pass, I will." She didn't finish the sentence. "You'll help me fix the station," John said. "God knows there's enough broken here to keep us busy for years." Something flickered in her copper eyes. Not quite hope, but close. "Yes," she said. "I will help you fix the station." 6 months passed. Station Theta 7 transformed. Systems that had been failing for years suddenly worked. Power efficiency increased by 18%. The hydroponics bay, abandoned for lack of proper irrigation, bloomed with food. Rhea moved through the station like a force of nature, identifying problems no one else had noticed and solving them with ruthless efficiency. The other residents grew to respect her, then to rely on her, then to simply accept her presence as natural. John found her one evening in the observation lounge, watching the stars again. But this time, she wasn't alone. 3 station engineers sat nearby discussing a proposed upgrade to the docking clamps. Rhea listened, occasionally offering suggestions, her presence no longer that of an exile but of a valued colleague. "You've changed," John said, settling into the seat beside her. "I've remembered who I was before I became a warlord's wife," Rhea replied. "I was an engineer, a logistician, someone who built rather than destroyed." She looked at him. "You gave me that back." "I just gave you access to a workshop." "No." Her voice was soft but firm. "You gave me trust, purpose, a place where my skills mattered more than my past." She paused. "You gave me a home." John felt warmth spread through his chest. "You're not my obligation anymore, you know. The Zenthari binding, it only lasts a year. You're free to leave in 6 months if you want." Rhea was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, the first real smile John had ever seen from her. "I know," she said, "but I think I'll stay anyway." Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, and inside Station Theta 7, 2 people who had been strangers found something neither had expected. A future built not on obligation but on choice.